Before we get into episode 113 of the Northeast Corner with Press and Journal journalist Sean McAngus, we have an ad read to do. The news you have all been waiting for, the Northeast Pipe Band concert is back. Hosted by the Bucksburn and District Pipe Band at Aberdeen Music Hall on the 27th of April 2024. Featuring bands such as St Lawrence O'Toole. The last time St Lawrence O'Toole played in Aberdeen was on the 27th of April 2013. 11 years on, the 27th of April 2024, a concert named Inspired in Aberdeen, Scotland will mark the second major concert. The 2024 concert will once again take place in the newly renovated venue and facilities of Aberdeen Music Hall. Bucksburn are excited to have Alan, Stephen and the band in Aberdeen for the 9th concert, a venture that started off as a one-off event back in 2010. This indoor pipe band gathering where pipers, drummers, families, friends and supporters gather for the start of a new season, where old and new stories are shared, new friendships made and old friendships reignited. Along with some exciting special guests to be announced at a later date, the concert will have a mixture of traditional and contemporary music that will keep the audience entertained throughout the night. Once again, Bucksburn look forward to another amazing pipe band event in the heart of the city and will continue to keep this venture alive with exciting top Grade 1 bands entertaining the captive audience. Now, to find out how you can attend this event and get tickets, please go to www.aberdeenperformingarts.com. And if you're interested in following Bucksburn and District Pipe Band on social media, please go to Facebook and type in at all lowercase, no spaces, Bucksburn and District Pipe Band on Facebook. And if you get a program for the event, you will see this very podcast studio's logo on the program for said event. Thank you very much to Bucksburn and District Pipe Band and Gus McCaskill for this opportunity to have our studio logo on the program for such a massive local event. Anyway, on to today's episode. Okay, so welcome back to another episode of the Northeast Corner. I believe it is episode 113. What I'm doing now is I'm looking at the previous episode number to remind me of said episode number. So if I am one out, forgive me. I did say that we were continuing the run of guests, and we are. And today we have, for the first time, we have a journalist on the Northeast Corner. I feel a bit out of my depth today as someone that's an amateur question asker, I guess I would call myself. But we have Press and Journal journalist Sean McAngus. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, great to be here. I'm chuffed. It's weird being on our end. I'm so used to asking questions.
I know. So. It's not the first time we've technically spoke, though, right? Because thank you that you're doing an article on the said studio. Obviously, there's been a bit of kind of technical difficulties in getting the photographer in, which we're obviously going to discuss off mic later. You've actually been on my radar for a little bit of time as someone to come on. I put a list out towards the end of last year, and I think that sounds a bit kind of sinister, doesn't it?
No. I saw the list. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So yeah, like you were on that list, and I also put out like a kind of poll of what kind of areas people wanted to see people coming on from in the future, and journalists was one of the top 3 popular categories. So what better way to start with? You are the kind of guy that I see most when it comes to like kind of local stories in the area. It's your kind of name that's attached to it when I see stuff on Facebook and stuff like that. And then obviously we connected via LinkedIn and reached out and set it up. So my first question is, when I always get into whoever it is that's sat in front of me, is I just kind of ask simply why they do what they do. So why journalism?
So it's basically it started as I'm a big football fan, so I got into like writing through football reporting. So I support Kilmarnock for my sins, and ended up I used to, every time I went to matches, I used to write kind of match reports and send it to uncle of mine, Uncle Tommy. He's no longer with us, but I used to post it down to him. He stayed in England, so I used to send reports, and that's how I got into writing initially. And then through that, I kind of got the opportunity, I think it was about 2013, into like Highland League reporting. So there used to be this website called Highland League Hub, where basically they had reporters all over the place, and they would cover all the different games in the Highland League. So it would be like, and then there would be also like interviews and various different things. So it kind of gave me a platform to start writing. So that was through a guy called Andy Skinner, who's actually one of my colleagues now. Yeah. He's a sports journalist. He usually does Ross County Inverness games now. So it was through that I started. So every kind of weekend, I would go to like games. Me and my dad would get free entry, some free pies sometimes if it's quality.
Perks of the job.
Yeah,
right? Perks of the job.
Perks of the job. So, and then you would go to the game, and then you would take notes, and then I would write the report when I would get home, depending on where I was going. It was mostly Lossiemouth and Turriff games, because at that time, it was quite funny because people used to not want to cover those games. So I just thought, I started covering. So I got to know the different characters there, which was always interesting. Like my first ever like interviews that I ever did was with a guy called Stevie Dunn, who was the Lossie manager. I was absolutely terrified of him. I'm not gonna lie. I was quite young, and it was like you'd be standing outside the changing room waiting for him, and say they got beaten in a game, and all of a sudden you would just hear a big clatter, and he'd kick this big bucket if he was annoyed. Sometimes he'd peer out, and he's obviously big. He was bigger at me at the time, so I remember the first time I was doing it, I was just terrified. But no, it was great, kind of fun. So that's how initially I got into writing, and then as it kind of progressed, I did, like, we used to do a thing where we'd sometimes get asked to do wee tiny reports, 200 words for Sunday Post. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if they still do that in terms of Highland League, it depends, but basically you'd get like a wee tiny bit in, but it was always good for like building up your portfolio and stuff. But I loved doing Highland League. I think I did it for like 2 years. And then we started doing, there used to be this thing called SHL TV, which was like by a guy from Nairn called Ross McLean. So he's a cameraman. He does a lot of stuff with BBC sometimes. So basically he set up this channel, and this was the first time they'd started doing like, say, one not live game, but they would film the footage of the game, and then they would do post-match interviews filmed as well. So I used to sometimes do them, which were great fun. I remember my funniest one was Brora Rangers had just won the league, and I was on the pitch, and I remember nearly getting absolutely drenched by champagne. It was funny because that team, there was players like Grant Monroe, who used to play for Cali. There was Ross Tokley and players like that. So that experience was really good in terms of being able to speak in front of a camera, and kind of you're listening back to what you said in terms of your questions, because you're so used to, like, when you're interviewing players or managers or anyone for like reports, you're just recording in it and then listening back, writing down notes, delete the recording. But it was funny listening to your voice, because you're thinking, maybe I could have phrased that properly, and maybe could have been a bit more concise or a bit more slow. So you kind of learn to be more precise with what you're saying, and kind of not think about it. Because I remember the first time I did it, I would overthink, but the good thing is sometimes they cut out the bits.
Yeah.
So it was always handy. So that was how initially I got into writing, was through all the football reporting, just because I'm a big football fan. So
I think we're always our own biggest critic, right? Like even like when I listen to like these back, just in editing purposes, I think to myself, like, if I got that EQ right, and I spent hours on it, and regardless of how much better I think I get it, there's still something that I point out. So I think it's just something that naturally goes away over time, rather than you find the like kind of perfect method for it all. in terms of when you were covering Lossy, would that have been around the time like for the likes of Shawnee Scott and I'm trying to remember the winger. I think his nickname was Baggers and stuff like that. Do you remember those kind of guys? Martin McMullen, I think it was as well.
Yeah, it was all those, and then there was also a guy called Darren Bailey. He was playing. He was at the time he was on loan from Martin. He was a pretty good player, and then there was Willie Mavers. There was a couple. It was a good young team, but they were always. I always felt they were heavily criticised in terms of, you know, they're one of the lesser teams, so to speak. But they had so many good young players, and it was good to see because I was seeing them a lot. I saw them develop, and they were getting better. And there was a couple of games they say they drew for Martin once, and stuff like that. So they were quite a good team. But it was funny just being around the place, and just some of the laughs. It was because you know yourself, being from Lossy, but because the pitch is so like. It's so close to the stands. It was funny when managers got sent to the stand because it was like, what's the point?
I know.
What's the point? Like, you can just sit there in the front row and you're like just about on the same.
I mean, the beauty of Highland League games as well for me is that if you watch the game of football on TV, there's like a home section with home fans and the away section where I can't speak to any other Highland League ground, but like for Grant Park, it's just a mixture of everyone in like the stands and like the away end and everything. It's like, what is going on here? But I would say if I was to describe Grant Park, it is a great laugh, but it's not for the faint-hearted. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching some games in the winter. I forgot what game it was, but it was so icy, and it's a sort of pitch. It was you could hear like the clipping of the football boots as they're going, and you're thinking, oh, someone's going to put in a sliding tackle and break someone's leg. But no, it was great. It was great fun, and just. It's just the character. I think Highland League, it's one of those things, obviously with every football, there is egos of some sort because they're football players, but it's just the different characters, and it's more, I feel like with the whole thing with football evolving, becoming more of like a TV thing rather than football itself, I think Highland League is kind of, it gets you more connected to the players, to the managers, to the people, and I think people generally care more rather than there's players on reasonably good money, but I feel like you feel more connected and part of it. I feel the worst thing with the whole Sky thing with football, I feel like it's just turned into a thing you switch on the telly, you watch it, and it's not the same experience as getting
100%.
Even though it can be bloody cold, that doesn't make a difference. It's just, and I feel like for myself, even the social element of getting out to actual games is so much better because you get to meet different weird and wonderful characters and people from different places, and it's always bizarre. Like, oh, I'm so and so's, mum, or oh, I've came, like the amount of people I know who, like, they don't live in Scotland but they follow Highland League. Like, I remember speaking to someone on Twitter and they were from like New York or something, and they were following it. It's that's like mental. so bizarre. It's either the common thing sometimes is because they like the names of the teams, or it's just because they just randomly came across it. And I think a lot of people generally follow, as much as people criticize Scottish football, I think a lot of people are kind of interested in it because it's Scotland, it's raw, there's nothing polished. I feel like with England and the other leagues, it seems so
show business,
business, and it gets to the stage that's just it kind of takes away from it, and you even see it like at games sometimes. It's like the half and half scarves. I can't stand that.
It's like, even like there's more of a show around football than just the actual game now as well, right? Like you have transfer deadline day and stuff like that, and Sky promote that like heavily. I remember, I know he's not there now, but Jim White in the yellow tie, and Harry Redknapp hanging out the car and all those kind of. But I think Highland League's probably like the last remnants of like that 60s, 70s, 80s kind of football, right? It's probably not exactly like it, but it's like the kind of final bastion of line of defense from this whole kind of commercialized version of the game that we have now, right? But yeah, like, and having like people on. I produce the Football Journals podcast in here, so it's been very Highland League dominated the last couple of episodes, and just hearing like the stories from like Frazee Kellis, like we're mentioning Lossy. Like I think one of the reasons Lossy get so much stick when they're doing bad is because in the 90s and stuff like that, they were still the underdogs, but they were competing at a very high level with the likes of Elgin, Ross County, Inverness Thistle, and the likes of that as well. So I agree with you. I'm very much sometimes I'm in two minds, because when I'm at the game and I'm like, I wouldn't necessarily, if I had kids, bring my kids to see this game because of the atmosphere can get a bit rowdy sometimes.
I know what you mean. It's
but I do enjoy it as someone that is like, you know, I am a Coaster supporter, but like a casual enjoyer of football in general. You know what I mean? It's not been too great recently, but hopefully things will turn around eventually. So my next question is, was there ever like a story or a news article? I know you mentioned that it was kind of sport orientated that got you into it, but was there ever like an article or a news story when you were growing up that kind of piqued your interest in media? Anything that springs to mind?
Not particularly. I mean, I used to read the back pages of the Day Record a lot, and it was funny. When I was little, I had like speech problems, and there were certain basic words I couldn't pronounce, but all these like bizarre foreign names. Like there was a guy called Vanagu Hesselink who used to play
Celtic
for
striker.
And it was funny. My mum and dad used to always laugh, and I used to laugh as well. And it was like I could pronounce like names like that, but simple words sometimes I would struggle. So I used to only read the back pages and stuff. So I would say there wasn't any particular stories. I mean, until probably, I would say, until I was like probably 18, 19, I didn't really read news really. It was more just, you know, the sports pages and stuff, just because that's what I was interested, going to the football every weekend, just like trying to find out, you know, what was the, you know, latest on whoever Kilmarnock were trying to sign or something. So it wasn't generally news. I wasn't really that interested until I would say until I got into, you know, I did some work experience. I think it was like 2014, which kind of got me into news, because I did that at the Turf Advertiser, and that was the first time I'd actually written about news rather than just sport. So
was that difficult to begin with, or?
I would say so, because I was so used to. I mean, it's funny with match reports, because you use all the like, you start repeating yourself with phrases like he slots it home, you know, from 10 yards, or it was like, my favorite word for years was like lackluster defense and stuff like that. So it was funny. So no, I would say I did find it hard at first. So it was like, I would say it kind of got me thinking a bit more, and it was slightly different because I was so used to just, you know, doing match reports, which are like, on the face of it, like once you kind of crack them, they're quite easy to do, like in the 10th minute, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of, so I would say it got me thinking a bit more and stuff, and just trying to test out writing a bit differently, because I think, ironically, I think one of the things I wrote about was actually sport as well, but it was ahead of the Commonwealth Games, because me, my mum and dad and my sister actually managed to get tickets to...
But that would have been the one that was in Glasgow?
Yeah. So I ended up, I think I did like some sort of preview piece or something like that. So that was quite interesting. And then also just getting to know how the paper works and stuff. And the funny thing is, just before I was leaving, I think I was only there for a week, it ended up, they had done a front page, and it was the Queen was coming to Turner Show. Yeah. So that was the big scoop of the year. So that was quite funny, seeing, you know, how they produced, because they actually, at the Turf Advertiser, which actually later on went on to work, that was my first ever full-time job, actually seeing you actually walk in. So there's still Peters are still a print company. So you used to walk in, and you would actually have to walk through the print room where they were printing the actual papers, and then go up the stairs to the office. So you could actually see see all the papers getting churned out and stuff, which was quite cool.
That must have been like the start of a movie. That always seems like that kind of scene, you know, where like there's thinking like a one of those machines that like bunches them all together and stuff like that.
Oh, it's so, and then you see people moving around getting, and then there used to be stacks of like big stacks of papers, then they would go out and, you know, deliver them and stuff. But it was so cool because it just felt odd, because you were odd in a good way in terms of you felt like you're part of all the process and seeing everything that's happening. Whereas like now with my job, like obviously printing happens down in Dundee, so it's completely different setup. But it just felt odd because you were like, say you were going down to lunch and then you just hear the racket of the machines like making this, so it was good.
It's like something's happened in the world.
Yeah. You're thinking, because we used to have there when I worked there, so it used to be the paper what came out on Thursday, because it was like a weekly paper. So it was funny when it came down to deadline, and then you'd hear all the people moving around and stuff.
Yeah,
it's cool.
All the cogs in the machine, I guess.
Yeah.
In the world of media.
No, it was great. I mean, just all those different people I met. I mean, and that's, I would say if I didn't do that work experience, I probably wouldn't have got the job that I did after college. Just because I remember, so I went to college for 2 years, and then it used to be during that, I used to every summer email them, pester them all the time. I was like, do you have any jobs? Do you have any jobs? I remember they offered me a job, and then ended up, I didn't take it because I was staying on to complete my HND, and then asked again as I came back up, and then I got a job. So I think it's just, it helped in terms of putting me in a situation that led to opportunities, because I feel like work experience is so important. But it's not just doing the writing bit or whatever work experience. I think it's getting to know the people,
becoming familiar with the environment and all that type of stuff. Yeah, totally.
Because I feel like if you don't, like, I know it's probably difficult, and if people are going to maybe companies, doesn't matter what industry, that are maybe bigger, you're not getting as much hands-on experience. I found that. So I felt like even the local kind of level at whatever, it kind of gets you in a bit, and you're getting to know the people, you're getting to know what they're like and stuff. And I feel like you build up a bit of a rapport, and it's like everything. I mean, my job, journalism, it's always about keeping in contact with people, and it's bad enough keeping in contact in our own personal lives with friends and family, but it's just trying to keep in touch with people, because people remember you when you make a good impression, or you get to know them, or you make an effort. Because if you just sit silently and just say you're on work experience, you sit silently, you do your work, and then that's it. They don't really remember you.
Yeah.
So it's trying to put yourself out there and thinking, like, maybe next time there's a job coming up, oh, how about Sean? Maybe he's the guy, or whoever it is. Because it's just, you kind of need to not shout about it, but you have to like stand out, because it's so like there's so many, especially in newspapers, there's so many different people who come in for work experience, and probably a lot of people don't remember them because they may be a bit afraid putting themselves out there, because it is hard. Because I remember being at Evening Times down in Glasgow and stuff like that, and you didn't get as much kind of hands-on experience, and they were too busy trying to focus on their own job, which is fair enough. But you just didn't get the kind of one-on-one and kind of, you know, hearing what the sort of advice, or, you know, getting in situations where you're able to grab a chat with them and, you know, talk through stuff, and even like tweaks of, like, I feel like in terms of feedback, you know, at the Turriff advertiser, we used to always get like feedback and stuff, so it was always handy. So it's like they always said they changed stuff, but they were like, we changed this because of this reason, maybe next time you could tweak it a bit, which I always found handy, because it made you improve as a writer, and it made you think more about, oh, maybe I'll do that next time. Because I feel like with stuff, like especially with writing and creative stuff, if people end up changing something and they don't tell you why or what you could do better, it doesn't help you in the long
No,
run
it can
and
destroy you, really, right?
yeah, I would say so. Or it just like basically leads you to just thinking, what's the point? Like, what's the point of doing that? But I always feel like feedback that's something that I like all the time. Feedback is great, whether it's bad or good. It's always helpful because it makes you, because everyone, including yourself, you want to improve.
Yeah, 100%.
You don't want to get stuck in at the same level in whatever you're doing. So I think that's key. I went on a bit of a tangent, but
No, that's what the show is all about, my friend. Trust me, there's been more weird and wonderful tangents than that one, and more in the future, most likely. So you kind of mentioned there college and that. So I was just going to kind of ask about your route into journalism. I take it was journalism specifically you studied at college.
Yeah.
Was it local college, or did you go away for a few years to?
So I went away to Glasgow Clyde College. So it's near Cardonald. So I went there for 2 years. So I did a HND, so like a diploma. So that was very helpful in terms of practical skills. A lot of my lecturers were like former journalists, which was always handy. Or current journalists. One of them is still a political reporter, which was always handy. So you got taught stuff about law, ethics, online, like you were in a team and you were doing your own like student newspaper kind of magazine thing. You're working together with different people. And I also think it got you outside your comfort zone, because I feel like in any area, in Scotland, I feel like sometimes people get trapped and staying in the same location, and it's not really healthy. And it's like you, like a lot of people who I know through college are probably my best friends now. They're still living elsewhere and stuff, but I feel like in terms of getting to know people, I was obviously only 18, so you're kind of getting your eyes open to the world in terms of, everything that happens, seeing things you don't necessarily see up here, and just like getting to meet very interesting people. So I think in terms of college, it just helped me, I think, build up my confidence in terms of putting myself in situations and meeting people who I wouldn't have necessarily met previously.
Oh my, sorry. Don't worry, but that's what noise gates are for, my friend. But I think you're right. I think college and university, that kind of 18 to 20 years old period of your life is very important, because I think, I've seen, when people from like up here that I was at school with started going to college and that in Glasgow, some went on to do what they ended up doing, and some went for the nightlife, so it shows people if they're actually wanting to follow what they're wanting to do at the time, whether if it leads to a diploma or they pull out and go another direction. So was that over the course? I think HND's 2 years, is it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. 2 years. So so we did like, first year was like kind of portfolio and different skills, and then second year we did like exams. So we did a reporting exam and different things. So no, but it was really helpful just in terms of getting to do different things. Like we actually did radio, and that's actually started my Highland League. I think I started my Highland League podcast.
Yeah, I was about to say, you've had some skin in the game for a while. I think it was 2018, 2017, I think I looked all the way back
pods,
to.
Yeah. So I'd initially had the blog back in 2014, and then I decided to switch to podcast just because of my jobs and stuff. I was writing that much, so I kind of got scunnered for a wee while. So but through the college, there was like a radio studio, and you got to do different skills. So that was always helpful. And then also just like meeting different, I think we got a couple of politicians and stuff. Ironically, the current First Minister was one of our guests.
No way.
Yeah, he was I think he was Transport Minister at the time. And this is a funny story. So ended up our lecturer, a guy called Charles Fletcher. He's still a political reporter, but funny guy. So I remember we were all late because of the ScotRail strikes, because there's always delays and stuff. So
a yearly occurrence, my
friend. Yeah. So it ended up we got a lot of us came up late, and then he jokingly said to us, "Oh, tell us why you're all late." But he tried to say it in a serious voice, and we're like, "Oh, Scott Rail." And then Humza, he was there, just looked embarrassed. It was funny, but it's strange meeting people like that. That was probably the first time I had interactions with politicians, which was a bit odd, but you get kind of used to it after a while. But it was just the different guests we had, like, and then we also had like summer lectures. We had someone who, I'm sure they spoke Russian and did documentaries and stuff, and there was a lot of like interesting different lectures. There was another one, Karen, who she was like a tabloid journalist, so it was quite interesting. It was like stories about being at gangsters' funerals and all that bizarre things. But no, but I think it really helped me. But I think partly I was probably more confident going down there because of all my kind of writing experience beforehand with football reporting and stuff. So I kind of partly I was ahead of a lot of people because a lot of people had done a bit of experience, but they hadn't done as much as me. So I think that put me in a good place, and I just think it kind of makes you grow up a bit, moving away and just fending for yourself.
100%.
And just I mean, it was funny. Originally I was never gonna go to Glasgow Clyde College, so I wasn't sure. I remember at school, I was never sure I was gonna get all my exam results, so I ended up thinking, oh, I'll just go to Aberdeen College, I'll do medium, something like that, which I wasn't that interested in doing, but I thought, it's a start. And I was surprised, and I did really well in my exams, and I ended up going to Glasgow, which I was delighted about. So it's been a bit of a swings and roundabouts with that, because there was one sort of period, as I said, which I thought, I'm not going to get the grades.
Yeah.
And that's probably, I mean, in terms of overthinking, looking at the notes that you sent me, that was probably a situation I kind of overthought about.
It's a stressful time though, especially like for, I've seen it in like younger members of my family that go through even 10 years on from when I was at school. Do you know what I mean? So I know they're trying to like change something in the curriculum at the moment. I don't know if that's going to be for the better or the worse, but it is like a 6-month kind of build up of where people get really kind of, fretting about this, right? Because it is a major deal. Like, obviously, I wouldn't say qualifications are the be all. Like, it's not like life's over if you don't get them, but they do help. You know.
Yeah.
So my next question is, I'm very interested in this one. As someone that just kind of freestyles this, thoughts just come to my head of what I want to ask someone. I write them down and then I ask. Is there a formula to preparing and asking questions? And I mean, I suppose that's probably something they would have discussed at maybe college and stuff like that. Of kind of, I don't know what I mean by formula, but like a process to.
I don't think there really is. I think in terms of, I would say the main thing we used to always get told, and we still get told today, is research. So I think the more you know about that person or that situation or that event will put you in good stead. So even like looking back at, old newspaper clippings, it's great with like, Google now, you can just search things and there's so much like archive, articles of various different issues, which is always helpful. So I would say in terms of that, is just preparation. So just research, and I usually normally when I do an interview, I normally put rough questions, and then as everything, it just kind of goes where they go, sort of. So if they say something that's maybe interesting, I maybe pick up on that. So that's why it's always important, which I found it difficult at first when I did interviews, is to, at the same time you're asking your question, and then you need to make sure you listen to the person when they're speaking. Because I always feel like at the beginning I was in a bad habit where I would ask the question, they'd be speaking, I'd be thinking about what's the next question I'm going to ask. not even. But it's difficult to get in that.
Listening to respond rather than listening to actually hear, right?
Yeah. And also it's like, it's fine with having lists of questions, which is always handy. I always have them. But sometimes you go off track or the subject changes. So I feel like it's just, I've repeated this a million times, but research and just like finding as much, so you have as much knowledge as possible, so you're prepared. So maybe like in terms of research, it always helps because you find something that maybe someone else doesn't know, which so means you can ask them something different that they've never been asked before. Because like everything with articles, podcasts, with everything, there's a lot of people who've been on so many different podcasts and that they've been asked kind of the basic same questions, that you're trying to find something out of the box and something different. So there's not a particular formula, but I feel like just researching and knowing as much and just paying attention. I always feel like you probably do this as well, but I treat every interview I do, at the end of the day, it's only a chat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not, I feel like if you make it more than that, you end up putting more pressure on you to be a certain way, and it just flows. Like most people generally who are coming on podcast or you getting interviewed in articles, they're not used to getting interviewed, so they don't want to be interrogated. Obviously there's certain situations with my job that you have to be a bit forensic and stuff with stuff, but I would say it's just about it's a conversation where we're humans. It's just I wouldn't completely say it's like speaking to your pal, because that's a bit different.
But it's something that we do every day, right? It only becomes a big thing in our head when it is recorded in some way, whether it's like this or written down or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, because you think about everything you say. Like you thinking like, oh, I should have. Like I still do that sometimes. It's like at the end of the interview, you're like, oh, I should have asked that. Oh, I didn't. Maybe if I phrase that question a bit more, because I feel like sometimes when people phrase questions, I think that's maybe another thing that's important. Like yes and no questions are all right, but they're only like if you're wanting something confirmed. Like I don't know, if I said, oh, are you a Lossy fan? Like something like that, where like the open questions are so much more, because you're trying to, I always feel like in any situation, any story, you're trying to find out how people feel, whether that's, how this has impacted you, say, emotionally, or, how has this changed this? Like you're trying to find out more rather than kind of the basic questions. But it takes time. I'm still learning. I mean, I've not actually been in the industry that long. So I think it's just, it's like everything. There's going to be occasions where you do interviews and at the end of it, you think, ugh, I should have asked that. But what can you do? You can't go back. You just move on and get better the next time. So. Yeah,
100%. You mentioned there about specific questions and that, so that kind of leads into this next one I have, is the ability to ask, I would say tough upfront questions, but that's a very kind of general term. But like you said, sometimes you do have to, I suppose there's always that kind of stereotype of the media of like, oh, I'm hesitant to speak to the media because I feel like they'll pry or whatever it may be, right? Do you either have that ability or not? Or is that something that can be learned?
That's a difficult one. I always find it hard to think about.
I come up with a thought-provoking ones,
yeah,
man.
That's a good one. So I would say, you learn it. I don't think you necessarily have it naturally, because you're in situations that you're asking people questions that they don't necessarily like, or maybe they are wanting to speak to you. Like I remember the first time I did an interview, and it was quite a sad one. It was about a mum whose son got knocked down by a car and killed. And I remember that was the first kind of difficult interview that I'd done, in terms of, you're dealing with someone who's been through a horrible time, and you're trying to be like in tune with them to an extent, you're trying to understand them, but at the same time, you don't really understand what they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
But you're trying to, so it was hard with like, in terms of saying stuff like, you know, how does this make you feel? Stuff like that, which obviously leads to, you know, crying and stuff. So it's tough in that situation, but I always feel like you have to ask those questions. If you're wanting to unlock whatever story is, there's going to be situations that's going to be difficult. And I feel like generally with life, there's plenty of situations that are uncomfortable that you have to put yourself like out there. And it might, maybe initially, or, you know, in the moment you're thinking, oh, no, what am I doing or something. But I feel like it is something you learn. I don't think it comes naturally, because I think you don't naturally get put in situations where you're asking people who are going through the worst things in their life, whether that's someone you know, dying or anything. You're normally not in that situation to ask them about that. It's not a normal thing. So I would say you learn it. But in terms of like our difficult questions, in terms of maybe, you know, politicians and stuff, they're supposed to be held to account. They can't expect to be asked easy questions all the time. And like a lot of roles, like you know, politics and different jobs, it's like they all have responsibilities and they need to be held to account. So you might get a bad reaction, but don't take it personally.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's important to say as well that, like, you know, journalists are also humans. Do you know what I mean? I think we see like things in the media. For example, the thing that comes to the top of my head is the phone hacking scandal, right? Where there was like stuff revealed, but it ended up like was it Millie Dowler? It was a young woman that had obviously been kidnapped in the early 2000s and that, and it turned out that the News of the World or something had then accessed her phone, and it had made the family kind of hope that she was still alive and that. Obviously that is indefensible, and that is, I would say, a rare case. But not every journalist is like that, but because that is the thing that is kind of reported on when it comes to journalism, because it's not the big stories, not, oh, a journalist went and did a very good interview today. It's the ones that are doing the sketchy stuff, I guess you would call it, that are the ones that are, you know, put in front of you, and that's, I guess, everyone's kind of imprint of what journalists are.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think sometimes with any industry, I think especially journalism, is that it gets so, you know, there's so many negative, you know, bad things that happen in it, which is unacceptable. But it's like any time, like you never hear, as you said, you never hear someone does a good job. There's never any like, oh, well done. And we're not expecting a pat on the back. That's not our jobs, to get pat on the backs for doing stuff. But it's just it's sometimes it's demoralizing seeing all the comments and seeing the stuff online about journalists, how we're just like all horrible and stuff. And it's just like, we do have feelings, and we don't, like, sometimes we make mistakes, and it's not always like, we don't always have bad intentions about stuff. Sometimes we just do stuff that we shouldn't have done. So it doesn't mean we're horrible people. I mean, everyone else makes mistakes. The only difference is, I would say, in our jobs is our mistakes are probably
scrutinized,
highlighted a bit more, like online something. So we're probably seeing more feedback on that directly, rather than, you know, maybe in our jobs, if you make a mistake, it's not a big deal, move on. But I would say, but it's like every industry, and it's like you're gonna have people who do horrible things, and you can't judge the whole industry on like one issue or one, you know, thing that. But the worst thing is, if people experience it personally, they're gonna take it as that's a whole industry, because that's their personal experience of going through whatever that is. But it's a weird one, because some people hate journalists, but it is what it is. You just.
So to follow up on that,
Yeah.
have you ever asked someone a tough question and they've reacted badly to it? If so, how did you handle that situation? Obviously, you don't need to name names and specifics and stuff.
I'm trying to think. I mean, I've had situations with, people will have a project and they'll promise it, like a regeneration project, and then it all goes
south.
Yeah, south. And then you end up doing an article on them and they feel they get annoyed at you because it's like, why did you print that? No, I didn't tell you could, write
you feel
that.
like you backstabbed them or something.
Yeah, and you're thinking like everything with public projects. I feel like if you're promising to do anything, whether that's, some sort of, center or whatever it is, I think you should, if you're going on about it and promoting it, you should be able
to follow through with it. Yeah,
follow through, or put up your hands and say, it didn't work out because maybe we didn't get the finance or something. But a lot of people just want it to just, disappear, and then people forget about it. And you're kind of like, really? Like, it's not really fair, because a lot of, especially up here, once there's a project to transform stuff, people get excited and they're like, oh, maybe that's coming. And then all of a sudden, suddenly it disappears and you hear nothing of it. And then people always ask, like, what's happening? So people are curious. But I would say, in terms of, you just don't take it personally. Everyone has an ego, so if they're gonna get prodded about something, they're gonna bite back.
Yeah, for sure.
But you kind of get used to it.
Got to have a thick skin in this line of work, for sure.
I would say so.
Deadlines, are they stressful? Now, I'm someone that is now not just doing podcasts, I'm actually doing a few things like promo videos and stuff like that. Yeah. Currently working on one at the moment that needs to be done in like 3 weeks' time, which is still a good, healthy amount of time. But just the fact that it has a date of when it needs done stresses me out for some reason, because it then makes me think, well, this is taking up a certain part of my day. When can I fit this in and stuff like that? Is that something that goes through your mind when you're trying to get like a story out and things of that nature?
I think it depends on how, how short the deadline is. I think if you have everything like in a row, all your ducks in a row, and you got everything, you're kind of quite comfortable about it. But I feel like sometimes it's when you're say you have a story and it's going for, I don't know, 5 o'clock. We now do more kind of online slots rather than, we have online different slots. So we ended up, sometimes you're chasing someone, you're chasing someone for comment and they're not answering, and you're thinking, oh, it's like a write or reply, and you're thinking, please just answer your phone. And you kind of get a bit stressed because you're wanting, like everything, you're wanting to put, give them a right of reply and to put their their point across. But it's just chasing people, because sometimes people say they'll get back to you and they never. It's like, it's always like you have to you're always in a chasing game in my job. Sometimes it's like someone says they're going to do something, you're like, you need to keep on chasing them.
The internal battle there is you start feeling like you're pestering people but you need to do that to get stuff done. So I can totally, not maybe in the same kind of exact way, but I can relate to that.
Yeah.
And one way, shape or form, for sure. Getting the job at the Press and Journal, how did that come about? How far removed was that from college? Was it a few years? Was it?
Yeah. So initially I had the Turf Advertiser, which I previously spoke about, where I had work experience. I ended up getting a job with them when I moved back up. So I was there for, I think, about two years. So it was really good for just, learning and getting myself inside like a newsroom and just getting to like cover events. Like the most funniest event I covered was the Tara show, which is a big farm show. It's brilliant. I remember I was in like a pen with cows, and I remember nearly getting charged by a big bull. Just got pushed out of the way in time. So stuff like that. It's just, you were getting to go out and cover different things, whether that was council meetings, whether that community events, farm shows, doing interviews and being at a local paper, you had more opportunities to kind of write different things. So initially I did a lot of, sports and news. So, which was always handy because I love sports. So, you got to do different, patches. We had 3 newspapers there. So we had the Turf Advertiser, the Ellen Advertiser, and the Inverurie Advertiser. So it was always interesting because they're all weekly papers. So it was trying to get different things. So each week we're kind of guaranteed like X amount of bylines. So it was a gift for like my portfolio. I mean, I was looking last night, I've still got this big box with all my portfolio. So that was my first job, and how like I got into it. And then the P&J came around, so I got to stage. I really love my job at Turf Advertiser. People I work with are amazing, but I just was kind of looking for the next step.
It's beginning to sound like a football transfer.
Yeah, I know. I didn't get a signing on fee, sadly.
Oh.
But it ended up, so I got an interview for the job. I think it was early 2020. So
of course, that's the pesky time in life.
Yeah. So I had the interview, and then I thought it went okay. And you're always wary, about interviews. You're not sure. And then I got told I got the job, and then I was off. I was away in early March, to Malta on holiday with family.
Oh,
so I was in Malta, and then the whole COVID situation kicked off, and we got back in the country just as lockdown happened.
No way!
And then I started my job. So for years I was working. I started my first day of work in my bedroom, and I'd never been in the Elgin office. I think it took a
like
year.
We were saying just before we came on, it was like 18 months. Like offices were shut down for locally, wasn't it?
It was longer than that. We didn't because we have a small office, so it was so weird. Because I remember the first day, and I remember I struggled at first with it in terms of working from home. Initially, just because it was the whole thing with COVID, and you were seeing all the stats of the deaths and of the cases, and I remember I was just getting in my head and stuff. I remember the first few days just thinking, oh no, what is this going to be like? But I think as I got to know, because a lot of my contacts now, I got to know them during COVID. So I used to, when I was phoning people, so it was brilliant. You got to speak to different people. You didn't get out and about as much.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is restricting, but it was so odd, like starting from my bedroom. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how I stayed motivated, but I just kept on going and going. And I think as stuff like kind of opened up, I was so glad and getting out.
I mean, that must have been like super hard during like the actual lockdowns themselves in terms of local news, because there was nothing going on really, right? Like obviously the only thing that was kind of like you were aware of at the time was the actual news, and it was like the stats thing, and then obviously there was like troubles in America and stuff like that, kind of interlude and those types of things. But yeah, it was a weird time, wasn't it? Very weird. Like especially, I don't know what it is, but like see the first couple of weeks of it, I think not everyone was relaxed, but everyone realized there was a situation going on, but everyone thought 3 weeks. That'd be a nice little break, wouldn't it? And then when it became 3 months, it was like, okay, maybe we need to find like a way out of this eventually. And it just kept going back and forth of opening and shutting, didn't it? And then, yeah, it's weird to think that's 4 years ago now. It really feels like it hasn't been that long. But yeah. So when did you first enter the office? Was it 2021?
Oh, no, I don't remember. It might have been 2022.
That is so wild.
I think it might have been, yeah.
Working somewhere for 2 years and never setting foot in the actual premises.
I think so. It was so odd because the only time I was actually in the office before it all shut down was for my interview.
Yeah.
So it was so weird. So it was, and I remember the first time I'd actually went up to Elgin, was for, I think it was the first time, or maybe it was before that. I don't remember, but it was when you had that mini lockdown.
Yeah,
in Elgin,
like tiers and stuff like that. Yeah,
it was so odd. And I remember I remember I felt a bit nervous and stuff driving up to Murray. I saw the Murray side. I was like, oh no. And then arrived and it was like interviews with two students because it was like a COVID testing centre at Elgin Academy.
Yeah.
And it was so funny. We were speaking to the youngsters about good night spots in Glasgow and stuff. And I remember when the teacher stuff just laughed and said there's no chance of you getting to any of them for ages. But it was so weird because it was like speaking to these pupils that they were like going through their exams and everything, and it was so like uneasy because like I always feel like with COVID we never really experienced something like that.
No,
and it's not like, you know, wars or anything where, you know, you can see what it is happening. Whereas COVID, it was just, obviously you didn't see COVID. It was,
I think it was like the first thing that like actually affected you though. Like obviously like wars and stuff that drives prices up and certain resources depending on where it is. But as bad as it sounds, there is part of you that can block that out because it's not at home. You know what I mean? Where this was literally like everywhere's the same at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like it was one of those situations. It kind of put us in a sense of reality of how lucky we have been over the years.
Yeah, 100%.
Because I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it was a scary time in terms of you didn't know, but a lot of the situations was like stay indoors, you know, stay inside and stuff like that, which was actually not that bad. But I feel like at times, I mean, I was glad of when you got out and did walks because I mean that kept me sane.
Yeah, the isolation was the worst part of it, right?
Yeah,
for many different reasons, you know.
Yeah, I can't imagine being a student or, you know, at school with that, because I feel like it partly impacted how we socialized and stuff because we're so used to like Zoom quizzes and all that stuff. It was just so bizarre because it got to stage. I remember like living in Macduff, there was like barely anyone out, so you wouldn't see, and you would now and again see some people and you'd just be like, hello.
Yeah,
and then
the only time I would see people in my street is, remember the whole 8 p.m. key workers thing? I'd see people hanging out their windows. That was the only, like, I remember I shaved my head because, you know, for people that, it's not a video version of the podcast at the moment, but for people that have watched previously, I have a receding hairline, deal with it. But I knew that that was going to be a problem in the future, so I was like, I'm going to use this time positively because we have a couple months of where nothing, you know, you're not going to be out in public. So I shaved my head, and good news, it actually looked okay. So I don't have to fret for when the time comes that I have to do that permanently. But I remember like that was the only time I was out, and like I remember my head being cold because I hadn't been used to cold air without hair before. But people just hanging out, like of windows speaking to each other from like their top floor windows, and I was like, this is so wild. Like I was, because throughout the day, you're doing whatever you're doing, whether you're working from home or if you're on furlough, you're watching TV or whatever was going on. But like those moments where you actually seen people, or if you've seen the odd person out on a walk, you were like thinking how different this has all went from like 2 months ago, where, you know, it's so strange. Very, very strange. I genuinely hope that like our generation's version of that is it complete. Like there's not going to be another thing like that comes.
Yeah. I just think it's, as I said previously, I think it's just probably impacted people socially and, you know, mentally and stuff. Because I feel like in certain situations we were like so used to just not human contact, but we were like limited. Yeah, that it kind of
became the norm, really.
Yeah, and it was like then you went out and about. Because I remember going on a wee jolly. It was I think it was once stuff opened up and I got to go away to Edinburgh with my dad, and I remember my dad's not a nervous person, and then it ended up we felt so odd being in Edinburgh amongst heaps of people. We're like, it was such a
even just like the first time being back in a restaurant, because obviously everything looked really different with like QR codes and like mask signs and all the big, you know, whatever the shields, I guess they were called. But it was just so strange. I remember like the first time being in that environment again and feeling like nervous that people were around and that, just because we're creatures of habit, right? So whatever we're used to is what we're comfortable with. But fingers crossed that nothing like that is going to happen again. Because I mean, the first thing that I remember being on the news when I was like a kid was swine flu in 2009, and there was always catch it, bin it, kill it. And then the COVID thing, the warning for that didn't come about until the lockdown had been introduced. It was like, I think it's a bit late for this now. Okay. What subjects do you find yourself covering the most?
So it's mostly kind of regeneration things. So a lot of like what's going into empty units and in our towns and in Murray and stuff. So those are kind of the main things. They tend to, people are always nosy about stuff like that and just like old buildings and stuff, because I most recently got to go inside the former jailhouse nightclub, which
oh no, actually I did see that the other day, yeah.
Which it was funny, it burnt down 3 months before I was born, so it was quite funny but it was like going inside those buildings which people remember so much about, and it's how preserved it was. And like I remember there was these painted murals on the walls, and even though the whole site is like open to the elements, it preserved really well and stuff. So just stuff like that is kind of the main things at the moment. We're kind of doing a big push with like Elgin kind of news, just trying to highlight the different like businesses and different stories, because there's so many different personal stories, not just in Elgin but all over. And I feel like it's just kind of showing people what's happening, you know, what was planned and maybe what's not happening anymore. Because people, it's sort of the stuff that people click on and people are engaged, because people are always nosy who's coming next, you know.
It's an attention economy we live in now,
yeah,
right?
so it's kind of hard to do a balance between that, and then I still do kind of personal kind of stories, like health ones or different. They come and go, but they're always interesting. Something I want to do more, which I haven't had the chance to, is more with the RAF. I love doing stuff with the RAF. It was really interesting. I remember this is one of my favorite stories, but that I've ever done. So I got to, this was just as, I think it was not that long after Ukraine was invaded by the Russians, and it ended up, I thought, we'll try and set something up to see what's happening behind the scenes. So I remember doing interviews with the Poseidon Squadron. So just to explain for people, Poseidons are basically spy planes that kind of spy, and they've got missiles as well, and they spy on like Russian submarines and stuff.
Yeah, they were brought up because there was suspected Russian sub-activity in the North Sea, I believe.
Yeah. They're still, I remember the guy saying to me that actually the whole of the UK is normally like surrounded by subs, like quite often by Russian subs.
I think they were looking at the fiber optic cables or something, which had caused alarm bells to start going.
There's stuff like that. But no, it was really interesting. So it was cool speaking to them, because they'd never done an interview. So in terms of, I was actually quite nervous going into the interview, because it's like you're speaking to people who are doing like a really, you know, interesting and kind of important job in terms of protecting us from any intruders and stuff. So I remember I was thinking, oh no, I'm not sure about this. And I remember getting an interview, and I remember them being very nervous. And I'm thinking, and I actually said it to them, I'm like, how can you be nervous speaking to me? I mean, you're used to being like surrounded by like Russian subs or like interacting or seeing one. How can you be nervous? And they just couldn't explain. But
I think it's just not being familiar with it, right? Like if you're out your comfort zone in any way.
Yeah. But it did feel odd. I would say in a way it gave me a bit of power in terms of the interview. Sure. But it was interesting just in terms of like trying to, you know, find out more. And it's trying to, like, when you're speaking to people like that, they're quite regimented in terms of like, there's a lot of like certain words, like kind of jargon or code words that people use, you know, in any walk of life. And so it was trying to get them away from that and trying to simplify stuff and, you know, trying to explain what something is and basically saying like, how does it feel, you know, when you first see like a Russian sub, it must feel like, for me, if I was in that situation, I would feel like terrified.
Yeah, you know, the situation you would know. Go through.
But like a lot a lot of them were like, oh, it's just like, they were like, oh, it's so normal in terms of, you know, you're trained to be ready for those situations. So you're always gonna be quite calm and composed, and which I couldn't really understand, because I was like thinking, if I was in as a normal person, I don't know how I would cope.
Yeah,
it's
panic.
so, yeah, and I wouldn't say panic, but I think it's because it's so unpredictable. But so that tying into, you know, that was probably my favorite story, in terms of it was just something different. They'd never done an interview before, which was like so bizarre, and it was just, it was interesting. Even getting to go on the base and stuff, it's just cool. It's just you have to go through all these like security stuff and stuff, which is always interesting. I remember the guards on that day, they were training these puppy dogs as like sniffer dogs, so it was like seeing them like adorable dogs, and then you had the guy with the big guns, and you're thinking,
base.
yeah, but it's quite cool, and it's even finding out about their motivations of what got them into it, and then also at the same time I got to speak to a couple of pilots. There was a young guy, he was in his 20s, and he was a pilot, and he just newly qualified, and he was just getting ready to go away to the Baltic to go and fly in that airspace in terms of near Romania and Lithuania, where they do like regular NATO airspace to defend from the Russians. So he'd never been in like a mission yet. So I always thought like that must be difficult in terms of once you get in that situation, like something could happen. Yeah. It's not like, you know, maybe what we do, if we put ourselves in a situation, it's not going to be life threatening. Worst comes to worst, we maybe don't get the greatest article or the greatest podcast, but it's just it was just so odd, because you're thinking you're so young and you're like you're flying that Typhoon, and it's like so powerful. So it was weird being in that base, but it was really enjoyable. I'm hoping to do more articles soon at some point. Fingers crossed.
Right, we will blast through these last four because we've already hit the hour. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but you just answered 2 in 1 there, really, because you answered your favourite story as well. So it's a step ahead of the game over here. Okay, so I kind of just want like, not one-word answers, but just, so I'll ask first. So there's 3 segments to this. So what's the best thing about being a journalist?
Getting to know different people, and also find out information before people, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. See the amount of things like being involved in, whether it's media or video work, and that if you're working with different people, see some of the things you hear or you see and stuff. It is pretty cool. You feel like you've got like an inside exclusive. What's the worst thing about being a journalist?
I would say probably the online thing.
Yeah.
I think with the comments and stuff, you can sometimes get affected by it. I've kind of grown to try and just ignore them completely, but it is hard because people are very horrible on Facebook, but it's the sort of thing they wouldn't say it to your face.
Yeah, there's like a subconscious, it's because they're behind a screen, right?
Yeah. So they wouldn't say it to your face. Like if you walk past them in the street, they wouldn't say it, but because it's on Facebook, they're brave and they do it on that. So I would say that's probably difficult. That's probably the worst thing, I would say. But apart from that, everything else is really good.
What's the most surprising thing being a journalist? Or that you found being a journalist?
Surprising thing. That's a tough question. I'm trying to think. Most surprising. I would say probably maybe the amount of people behind the scenes, I would say, is the most surprising. From when I first went in the industry, I didn't realize how much people were involved in it. You always just think about, whether that's, tele or news, you only think about, you say, the writers or the presenters. You don't think about the other people who do a lot of important jobs. Like we have, photographers who are amazing. We also have like design team who like craft up feature images. We've got like sub-editors who make sure your copy's all okay and different. So there's so many different jobs that you don't necessarily know of, and they're not like all public facing. So you wouldn't know the people necessarily, because most of the people are either are editors, the major bosses, and kind of the journalists, because we kind of put our name and face to kind of everything we write about. So,
what in your mind makes someone a good journalist?
I would say being nosy. I would say being human in terms of being able to connect with different people, and be able to cope with difficult situations, whether that's speaking to someone who's lost a loved one, or speaking to someone who's speaking about their health journey with maybe they're battling cancer or something. So I feel like it's just like wanting to find out more. I would say also not kind of stopping when you hit the first hurdle, because I feel like it's like I've had this situation with stories before where you're like, you get one hurdle and sometimes you're like, oh no, I don't want to do this, and then you get there. It's just you have to be quite driven and not give up, because it's so easy, like if someone doesn't answer the phone, or if you don't get a reply on the email instantly, that you just get annoyed. And also like being able to balance different activities, because you're wanting to have a situation where you have different stories going on at the same time. So if something drops, you've got a replacement. So I would say just being driven, a good listener, and just human, and being able to connect with people. So.
And before the grand finale question, you are the host of the Highland League podcast on Spotify. You have a bit of competition now with Mr. Stewart coming up in the fast lane with the football journals. How long has that been going? How many episodes have you done? What's been the most kind of interesting parts of that kind of journey for you?
Yeah, so I've got about 50 episodes now. So I started it back in 2014, so it was actually kind of near, I think it was near enough when I was going to college nearly. And so ended up, I'd started my blog. So I had a blog previously, which I still have, I don't write as much, called Scottish Fitba Base. So I started that because I wanted to kind of showcase Highland League football a bit more. So it got to a stage that I thought, why not turn it into a podcast? It means I get to speak to people longer. So that's how that became, and it's been interesting speaking to different people. Like I remember one of my early stories was there was a guy called Marek Mado who played for Huntly and for Martin, and he's still playing out in Australia. So he was playing in the league below the A-League. So there's like no promotion or stuff to the A-League. So it's the National Premier League. So he was playing out there, and he was telling me how he'd been on trial to an A-League club, Central Coast Mariners, and it was at the same time that Usain Bolt was on trial. Yeah. So that sort of story.
I forgot he had a few. Did he not have like a pro trial at Borussia Dortmund or something like that? As well?
I think it was a bit of a
show, PR stunt,
thing. But so that was a bizarre story. So and then I remember my other good one was, there was a guy, he's playing for Inverurie now, Paul Coots. So as a youngster, he'd been in the Highland League, then got a big move to England and stuff. So at that time, he was playing for Sheffield United, and they were going for the Premiership promotion. So I remember I thought, I'll punt Sheffield United an email and see if I got. And then within like 10 minutes, I got his phone number and I got a podcast. So that was really interesting, because that was a guy who'd came from up here, and then and then he was quite young, and then got to move down to England and made a good career of himself. So that was interesting. And then just the different the ones I'm doing more often is like players going out to Australia.
Yeah,
because
that is quite. It's kind of unreal how common that seems to be for the Highland League.
Yeah. I think it's mainly lifestyle change. I think there's a lot of like good opportunities where clubs are maybe offering you a job as well as playing football.
Right. Okay.
And also like it's much sunnier than Scotland.
Yeah.
So that maybe puts, and I think there's been a lot of cases where players have done so well. So in terms of like a lot of clubs now, they look for players in the Highland League. I remember for years, clubs still do this, but they always ask me sometimes for what Highland League players do I recommend and stuff like that. So it's always interesting. Like I'm trying to think, there's been so many, like out of all the names, I mean, at the moment there's like Scott Davidson, who used to be at Nairn, he's playing out in Australia. He's actually playing up front with Lee Griffiths, which is quite
no way.
Yeah, it was quite a funny thing. And then you've got a lot of different people, like Darren Bailey, who used to be at Lossy. He's now like a player coach out there. You've got Sean Ellis, who used to play for Fort William. You've got so many different names. I feel like it's just maybe it's a change of scenery, change of league. And it's just like, just a different opportunity. And a lot of people tend to, I mean, from the stories I've had, a lot of people either, go out with their partner, have a kid out there, or there's been some who've actually met their future, wife out there.
Spouse out there. Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting, but I always feel like maybe it's because a lot of these players maybe feel they don't get a chance to go up the Scottish leagues necessarily.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think the higher up leagues look at, the Highland League enough. So I feel like they need to, but no, my podcast, I really enjoy doing it. I've not been doing it as regularly as I wanted to because of work and stuff. But it's just it's an excuse to chat about football.
Yeah.
So any excuse, and it's just
stuff that you probably have a bit more creative control over and stuff like that.
Yeah,
as well. Yeah,
slightly. But I would say also because it's just having like an hour or whatever and just speaking about football. So I'm hoping to do more kind of podcasts soon. It's just I try and think of guests outside the box.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to I feel like a lot of podcasts generally go with the same guests that everyone does and it gets a bit boring.
Repetitive in that.
So you're trying to find people who are a bit, interesting. And a lot of people, it's funny the amount of people I've had on who are like, oh, I've never done a podcast, and they do it and they're like, oh, actually I enjoyed this. Because the reality, it's just, as I said earlier, it's just a chat between people. It's nothing different. I mean, the only difference is you're recording it and it'll get, published at some point.
And it's such a popular kind of market now, isn't it? For like the last probably 10 years, for something that like kind of started around the 2004 mark. And now it's just so accessible. You don't necessarily need the highest setup to do one, and stuff like that. And then people have made video ones, and then I think the biggest TV show in the world is basically a podcast now. Thank you very much for coming on today, Sean. It is crazy how quickly an hour goes by when you get to chatting. Before I ask you the final question that I ask everyone that comes on here, thank you very much to anyone who's listened this far into episode 113. I think. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to keep hitting that 5-star review on Spotify, Apple. I don't know if Amazon do it. I can't ever seem to see it, but if it is there, feel free. And the YouTube version, I always feel like some kind of TikTok generation kid saying this, but if you could like and subscribe to the channel, that would be very much appreciated. You can follow Sean's Highland League podcast on Spotify as well, I believe. Is it just Spotify or is it Apple as well?
It's on all the podcasting platforms.
All relatable podcasting platforms. Simply the Highland League podcast. So here we go. What is one thing you overthink?
So one thing I overthink. I'm probably overthinking this just now.
A lot of people say that, and I don't let them away with it. I'm like, no, that you can't get yourself out of it by saying this question, the answer to this question. A lot of people say everything.
I wouldn't say. I would say sometimes I think I look back at, you know, what I've done so far with my work and this stuff, and I do sometimes overthink stuff and just think, "Oh, how have I got here?" Like sometimes, which is probably a bad thing to do, but I feel like with everything, with the, you know, going back to when I did my exams, I probably thought about that a lot and thought, you know, I'm never gonna, you know, get where I want to or stuff. So I think probably overthinking about what I'm gonna do next is probably, whether that's, you know, life, you know, in terms of, you know, where I'm gonna live, or, you know, jobs. I would say I don't overthink as much as I used to, but I would say probably overthinking about what's the next step in terms of what I want to do with work.
Yeah. The future is something that I think a lot of us overthink, just because it's important, right?
Yeah.
We never seem to focus on the present. We overthink about the past. We overthink about the future. And never maybe. I know I kind of feel like I'm going down a bit of a guided visualization thing.
No,
here.
I know what you mean.
But yeah, thank you very much for coming on, mate. Much appreciated. Much appreciated for doing the article when we get that sorted out with the photographer when it does come out. Much appreciated on that. And we will be back for episode 114, which I don't know who it's going to be yet. We're taking a bit of a break for a week because I've got to get this promo video that I mentioned earlier done. And I think we're going to try and make episode 114 young savage Ethan Hendry, who's been gaining a name for himself in the kickboxing realm. And we will see you whenever that episode is released. Friday, 5 p.m, of course, but however many weeks it is away from now. So, good night.